Today on the ProLife podcast, ever been to the grocery store and seen someone with a cart full of papayas? It's probably not being used the way you think. We should talk about this. Let's get started. Happy Thursday, ProLife family. I hope you had a great Memorial Day weekend. Thank you for joining us. Maybe if you're still on vacation, you're joining us. It's cool. Hey to my friends at church who are now watching. We've kind of passed around subscriptions. We're having a conversation at church talking about, listen to your podcast. And everybody else went, you know what, you have a podcast? I'm like, yes. I do. So
it's a party.
Anyways, hey, Matt, if you're watching. Ladies, thank you for joining us today. Would you like to introduce yourselves before I try to introduce this nonsense?
You got it. Kim Schwartz, Director of Media and Communication.
Bailey Sunbeck, Development Associate.
Brent Clegg, I'm an IT Director. Yes, beauty before insanity. You make me read these headlines and they make my head hurt. Abortion bans could drive away young doctors, new survey finds.
It's fascinating stuff, really. It's full of irony. It's sad. It's also kind of encouraging.
In some ways, in other ways, I'm just like, what are they putting in the water now?
They don't know that they're being encouraging because, this really underscores the concept, the phenomenon that we've already seen, that most OB-GYNs do not perform abortions. It's about 86%, only 14% will do abortions. And so now the medical students are like, man, it's so hard to find somebody to train us to do abortions. We want to, but how are we going to learn how to do this? So
the survey that's included in the NBC article, it is a survey of 494 medical students in 32 states. Most were women. More than 3/4, 76.9%, said that access to abortion care would influence where they would pursue their residency. So this is interesting because you hear this and you're like, okay, they're wanting to, go somewhere where there is abortion bans because they agree with that. No, they're wanting to go be in a residency at a place where there are no abortion bans because they are pro-abortion. And the reason being is because they either want to be a part of that, they want to perform abortions, or they would just want to live in a state that has abortions for their own family reasons. Yes, you heard that right. They literally said
for their family reasons.
For their own families.
That's not how this works.
I know. It's very confusing. It says 72.7% of respondents said that abortion access changes would likely or very likely influence where they would start a family. So again, in one sense, you might be like, oh, they want to live somewhere where there's abortion bans because they want to start a family and they're family oriented. No, that's not what they're saying.
And if they're obese, 2023. That's where the business is.
Good point.
Yes.
So we need to start a family. So we need to have abortion in order to destroy our family so we can start our family.
This is what happens when you lower education standards.
Oh my gosh. That's pretty painful.
And then there's another quote from the article. It says, this is from one of the students. It says, part of me is like, if I leave this state and if other healthcare professionals leave the state, we're leaving the population that so desperately needs help, talking about Georgia. And then a move back to California would afford her more experience in abortion care for her patients. And then it says, I want to have reproductive health care for myself or my eventual family that I may have. And it's just, she doesn't want to live in Georgia because you can't perform abortions there. So can you really even help people if you can't give them abortions? So she'd rather live in California for her own sake. But then she feels bad for all the people that she's leaving in Georgia. I think they're in good hands.
Right.
Go back to California.
Yeah, exactly. If that's your goal as a doctor is to end human lives, you might not be that helpful. Maybe do some soul searching first. Because I do believe that these medical students are smart and capable. And that we could benefit from smart, capable doctors. That would be a good thing.
But we said earlier, we joked that it's kind of encouraging. The encouraging part is that it also talks about how their struggle right now as these med schools and med students that need to learn how to do abortions, that it is limited training. And if you
in a creepy voice.
I know.
Yeah. Good job.
Oh, very weird. But they're saying that this learning these skills is limited right now, especially in states where it's illegal. Because if it's illegal in Georgia, then
you can't practice.
They can't watch a doctor perform an abortion.
Yeah.
Darn.
Right. Exactly.
And so it's interesting to see the medical community kind of react to this and be like, oh, shoot, like not only can there not be abortions in the state for my own sake, but also I can't learn. And that's encouraging for us pro-lifers that they can't learn how to do abortions.
Right.
What? These doctors are upset about laws that cut off future generations?
Right. It is quite ridiculous,
Weird.
but it's an encouraging trend because we actually already kind of saw this before even Roe v. Wade was overturned, that there aren't very many doctors who are willing to perform abortions in the first place. Even fewer who are willing to like train and like go that route. And so you kind of like decrease the supply of doctors who are trained, who desire that, who are exposed to that. So that's an encouraging trend. But I also do want to make the remark too that like this doesn't inhibit other like life-saving care. Like if a woman is having a miscarriage, OB-GYNs still get trained for that. There are still miscarriages that happen, and therefore OB-GYNs and doctors who are trained to take care of the woman and to take care of the deceased child as appropriate. What we're talking about here is elective abortion. These people in the article are not lamenting like, oh no, I can't learn how to perform, to treat a miscarriage. I don't know how to perform an abortion that if the woman's life is in danger, like immediately. That is not what they're lamenting here. They're like, I just want to, give abortions for any reason at any time. That's what they're talking about. That's what we don't want.
I saw another article about some schools getting creative with how to train medical students on abortions, actually here in Texas, in Austin.
I didn't see this one in the chat over the weekend and didn't catch up on this until we're making coffee in the other room. And you were trying to explain this to me. And I'm just like, what? So you get to read this one because
go for it.
It's nonsense.
It's very interesting. So it's a Teen Vogue article from back in February. And the cover of it, you see a bunch of papayas. And do you want to read the headline? You're so good at that.
You make me read these weird things. As restrictions complicate abortion training in medical schools, papayas are filling the gap. What?
And so, okay, I'm going to be real. I read that and I was like, okay, this is probably what they mean. They're like putting abortion pills in papayas and like sending them. That was like where my mind went. I was like, what about papayas? I was so confused. But that is not what it means.
Leave it to Teen Vogue to just deliver weird.
Yes. So at the University of Texas at Austin's Dell Medical School, they host papaya workshops where they use the tropical fruit as a uterine model, and they train doctors on how to do manual vacuum aspiration, a method used for early first trimester abortion.
So medical students in Texas, a pro-life state where they can't do actual abortions, they're practicing on papayas. There was an interesting quote from one of the medical students saying that they were at the grocery store and they've got 40 papayas in the cart, and the checkout cashier was just like, what on earth are you doing with 40 papayas? And it's like, well, we're trying to save abortion care. And
they're filling the gap, darn it.
Yeah, dang. Goodness gracious. But just from a practical perspective, if I were going to have any kind of surgery done and then the surgeon was like, hey, don't worry, I practiced on a papaya, I'd be like, nope, I'm out of here. Hard pass.
Well, and the very dark side of it, I'm not going to read this whole article. It is so sad we're laughing, but it's really sad. Mm-hmm. They say that the papaya is really a good use for practice because whenever they're practicing with the suction tools that they use in abortion, they know that they've done it successfully with the papaya because all the seeds will be suctioned out. And so like that's just really just so sad to imagine these doctors in Austin doing like after school like extracurricular workshops to try to I'm doing air quotes if you're if you're listening to the podcast, not watching, but they make it sound so virtuous, and it's actually so dark and it's so sad. But I am encouraged, like we said before, that they aren't doing this on actual humans because they can't.
Right.
Praise God.
Yes.
Praise God that they cannot do that in Texas. It is banned. They had a quote from the article. It says, according to a report from the Society of Family Planning, in the first 2 months alone following the court's ruling, 10,000 fewer people had an abortion. And of course, they're saying it in a sad way. But what a victory. That is amazing.
Yeah.
And they're scrambling, trying to figure out how to keep teaching people this. And so we need to pray.
Yeah. In other words, Teen Vogue, that is 10,000 babies born.
Yes.
Yay.
Amen.
My goodness.
So if you're in Austin and you see a 20-something with a cart full of papayas, apparently they need a lot of prayer.
Maybe just stop and talk to them for a second.
Yeah.
We'll see. But this, surprisingly, is only the beginning of the shenanigans that we're going to talk about today, because China is at it again.
The headlines you make me talk about.
I'll say this one in a minute.
Yeah, Kim will tell you the next pile of crazy. Texas Right to Life is facing 14 lawsuits from Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry. They're suing us because we helped pass the Texas Heartbeat Act, and they're trying to scare us pro-lifers into backing them. Please join us in the fight against Planned Parenthood and donate to protect the Texas Heartbeat Act. You can fight for the unborn and build a pro-life Texas that values every human life. Go to texasrighttolife.com/lawsuit to make your contribution. Every cent will help, and it's greatly appreciated.
Without warning, you or your loved one could end up in the emergency room where every second counts and your medical wishes matter more than ever. However, if your loved one doesn't have the right medical documents on hand, they may not be able to make decisions for you in a crisis. My Life Angels solves all of this by walking you through step by step in creating these important medical documents and storing them online securely for you and your family to access at any time. The service is only $7 a month, but use the link in our description for 20% off your initial subscription period. Don't let strangers make life and death decisions for you. Get the My Life Angels app today.
Welcome back, friends. So, before the break, Kim was going to share our latest. This is the China story, right?
Yes, we've talked before about China and the tragic effect of their one-child policy. Obviously, there's the human toll of how many children were killed from the one-child policy. Then they loosened it to two-child policy. Then they loosened it to three-child policy. But China is very, I don't want to say quickly realizing because it took them decades, but they are very suddenly realizing now that this is creating so much damage to their country that they're trying to reverse course. And so the new news from China is that China is offering free fertility treatment to boost their record low birth rate. And so this takes the form of IVF now. The National Healthcare Security Administration said that it would extend its coverage to help cover the costs of families trying to conceive with assisted reproductive technology. The most common performed procedure of this type is in vitro fertilization. Right. And so China is even admitting, the National Healthcare Security Administration admitted and described China's falling population as one of the biggest obstacles to national development, according to CNN. And so they're realizing that they've gone too far, that the one-child policy has just decreased their population so much, then tried to loosen that with two-child policy, then tried to loosen that with three-child policy, and they're just seeing this isn't working. And it's because if you go back and listen to the China episode that we posted a month or two ago, that it really started as a cultural trend, that before they actually implemented a one-child policy, the government was trying to discourage families from having children. So they made this huge cultural campaign against children, against families. And that still has its roots. It's still in the hearts of the people there because it's just been ingrained in them for so long that it's selfish to have big families, that you're going to suffer, that it's going to be difficult to have families. And so now, actually, for the first time in more than 60 years, China recorded its first population decline. Not just a decline in birth rate. Their birth rate has been declining, but like they had last year fewer people than whenever they had the year before. And that is a dangerous trend. And so the government is actually worried about that now for its economy, for its national security. And so they're trying to reverse course, and they're trying to encourage women to have IVF procedures. Because also, I can't stress the cultural impact enough that women there don't want to have families and children. And I was curious too about why they needed to offer IVF, because we talked a little bit about the imbalance that China has in its population, that there are more men, like far more men than women. And so women kind of have like their pick, like they can pretty much choose any guy that they want because there are so many men trying to woo the women there. But they're still like, it's interesting that they're still trying to push IVF and like encourage women this way. And so I was trying to figure out like, why would they do that whenever they can, like the women should be able to just kind of have their pick to, have a family naturally like they would. But I think part of it is the effect that forced abortion has had. And I don't know if this trend continues, but under the 1-child policy, 2-child policy, 3-child policy, women would be forced to have abortions. And then abortion, just anytime, not just when it's forced, can affect your fertility and decrease your ability to have children later. And so that's why I was thinking maybe that's why they're trying to push IVF too. But I think overall China is like, they're really just trying to reverse course as much as possible. So they're just like, we're putting anything on the table that we can, except for the cultural mindset. They, I guess, haven't addressed that too much, but maybe they're trying to.
There's also a decent likelihood you get multiples as well with IVF.
True.
So maybe they think that can more quickly boost the birth rate.
Yeah.
But the moral of the story here is you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. It doesn't, you can't just undo that thing real quick and easy.
Yeah. And I'm good on them for like trying to, in a way, undo what they've done in the past several decades, but it's not for the right reasons. It's not like, oh, killing children is immoral. Like they haven't had a sudden change of heart. But just like they were warned before they implemented the 1-child policy, how this would have a devastating impact on the country. And nobody listened, but so they still did it anyways. And that's caused, I cannot imagine how many children have died under that, under the 1-child policy. But now trying to encourage families to have children, that is a good thing. That is a good direction, but they're not really, they're not motivated by the right reasons. And they're also not promoting, the best kind of approaches to that. There are several ethical concerns with IVF, which we've talked about before many a times.
Concern. This is China.
Right, exactly. So I am curious though, like if this is the direction that they're going, and because it's very clear that China isn't motivated for the right reasons, it's not just that they love families, it's just they are like, oh no, we don't have enough people, we need to reverse course. Like I would not be surprised if they start going in the direction like we've talked about, using brain dead women as surrogates. That's a very interesting episode if you have not watched it. I wouldn't be surprised if China starts going in that direction where they just start trying to have like as many children as possible through any means, including like exploiting the bodies of women like in brain death, or even like the Uyghur population that is being held in concentration camps. Like if they have forced abortions right now, but if they're going to go the direction and like perhaps use them to be like forced surrogates or something like that.
I think this is really important to talk about, not only because it's like crazy, but also because it highlights how important the cultural movement is. Like a lot of people think that after Roe v. Wade is overturned in America, like the fight's over, like, you know, the legal side of it's over. And the culture side of it is so important. Like, think about how much destruction has happened since our own laws, like since Roe v. Wade happened. Think about how that has shifted all of our mindset on family, and how now we're having to convince women that, like, yes, like you should have babies, you should have a family. And you're seeing all of these the younger generations just remaining single or getting abortions. Same, like, I'm just hearing you talk about China and how it's been so destructive for them. Yeah. The same way for us, like, we need to build the most pro-life America we can, because the future generations depend on that. The future generations will want to have a family if we are promoting family values. It's just going to get worse if we let the course continue how it was under the cultural conversation of Roe v. Wade.
And really, I think the best way to do that is to live your family life beautifully and authentically. Obviously, that's easier said than done, because we all know that families are very, very messy. But people, so I talk about this quite a bit actually at church, that the transcendental values of God are truth, goodness, and beauty. We know God through truth. We know God through goodness. We know God through beauty. And increasingly, especially with young people, they don't believe in truth. They don't believe in objective truth. So if you say, like, oh, well, God is real, like, this is true, they're just like, whatever, what's truth? Like, who cares? But I think everybody sees and knows goodness. And I've heard a lot of conversion stories recently of people coming to Christ because they see the goodness of Christians. And so we can live that and we can see that in all of the aspects of our life, especially, I think, with these increasing battles in marriage and family, that if you live the goodness and show the goodness of family life and make sure that other people can see that, then it becomes appealing. It becomes desirable, just like how people can see the life of the Christian and how an authentic Christian will have the peace and joy of Jesus, even in the worst circumstances. And so with family life, like, if we live our Christian values through our families and exhibit the goodness that God has for us there, that other people can see, that is appealing, that gives, this person has purpose in their life. This person has love in their life. And I want that. And I think that there's no better argument. There's no better case. There's no better evidence for why marriage, family, children are all important than just seeing that and living that authentically.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
But to your point, like, it is true that this article continues and says an increasing number of women in China are delaying marriages and choosing not to have children, often citing financial constraints and the need to prioritize their careers. And so, like, as much as China wants to do, as much as China is going to try to do, to say, like, oh, well, you have this option and this option and this option to have a family, they're just going to be spinning their wheels until they address the cultural problem. And so that's why it's important to talk about these things on here on the podcast, here at your church, and with your family, and just making sure that, you know, people can see the goodness that there is, that God has given us through love, through marriage, through family, through children, all of the things.
Yeah. And be a critical thinker. Don't be so influenced by, you know, the government and by social media and celebrities, because to some people, it might sound silly. It's like, oh, of course I disagree with so-and-so, and I have my own opinions about this. But you'd be really surprised over a long period of time how all of those opinions about family and having children can just, like, seep into you and you don't even know it. Or, you know, your friends and family that maybe don't have super concrete principles or opinions.
Yeah.
So
dig deep, y'all.
Absolutely. Definitely want to question, why do you have those opinions? What are those based on?
Yeah.
And then if you realize they're based on bad things, maybe we need to rethink that and replace it.
Yeah.
Oh, friends, thank you for watching another episode of
what sounds like Babylon Bee articles, but
yes,
aren't.
I'm always like, Papayas. This is from the bee, right? It's like,
hey, at least we're not. What was the slow-moving disaster or something that they said in that article?
Yes, they said that the limited training on abortion is this slow-rolling, man-made disaster.
Good. Good. So at least we're not that.
So next episode, we promise. Well,
We can't make that
We-
promise. We will
we
be here,
almost
though.
promise. There's a lower likelihood of super weird stories.
Fair.
See you next time. Thanks for watching.